I just wanted to say thanks to both of you all for taking the time to interview with me. I guess we can start with you all introducing yourselves.
You wanna go first?
Sure. So my name is Giselle Perez. I'm 16 years old, and I live in Sonoma County. I'm a junior, and basically, kind of the reason that I just got into climate activism was because just our county since 2017 has been hit repeatedly for the past 4 years with wildfires that have devastated our community, and it was just such a wake-up call to experience that and just see the anxiety that it created in our community, and just to see like the fear smoke inspires now in our friends and our peers, just to like see everyone's reaction to these climate related disasters really just inspired, like got me to want to do something, anything I could.
Yeah, and then my name is Madigan Traversi. I'm 17 years old. I'm also from Sonoma County, California, and I'm a junior. Um, I lost my home in a wildfire when I was 12 years old. So I was in seventh grade. That was in 2017. It was the Tubbs Fire in Santa Rosa, California. So I lost the property that I grew up in, all of the nature around me that just like raised me, the structure that raised me. And it was a pretty devastating loss for my family and I, as well as so many of our neighbors and so many thousands of people in our county. And I wouldn't say that was necessarily the thing that started me on climate activism, because I think in seventh grade and throughout middle school, I wasn't necessarily getting a fully well-rounded climate education. And so I didn't really become aware of the correlation between climate disasters and climate change until I entered high school, which is when I joined Schools for Climate Action freshman year. And the teachers here at our high school have been really, really inspiring and have given us a really well-rounded climate education. And I think that's what really inspired me, and especially learning more and more about the correlation between, I mean, specifically for me, wildfires and climate change, but also so many other disasters like floods, hurricanes, etc. That's really, yes, just that's really motivated me to keep working on advocacy. So yeah, that's my story.
Well, it's great to meet you all both. I'm sorry to hear about your experience about losing your home in a wildfire. It's that's definitely some of the things, why we're all in this space right now, to kind of prevent those things from happening. And you both are doing great work on the efforts to change that. But yeah, the first question that I wanted to ask you all is, when did you all first learn about the climate crisis?
I think we've both of us kind of just like in school, like people would talk about climate change, how our globe is heating up, how the world's getting warmer, and how we can each personally kind of just do our own part to fix it, like using like recycling, reusing things, turning off lights, turning off water. And while all that is important to do, it's definitely doesn't teach children about just like how systemic of a problem it is. Like it can't just be fixed by reusing a plastic bag or just like turning off your lights. It's something that has to be changed through laws and just through the government's support of it. And I think that's what we really like when we came to high school. That's when we really discovered like just how big of an issue it is, and that it just is such a massive thing that can't be done by individual problem solving and needs a systemic change to it.
Yeah, and I definitely want to expand a little bit more on the carbon footprint and British Petroleum's part in that, which I'll maybe talk about later on. But just in terms of my own climate education, I definitely began to learn about it in middle school, but it was all from a very scientific standpoint, which I am now very, very grateful for, because it's something that is absolutely not talked about enough. And I think there are a lot of places where it's taught from, I mean, either climate denial and it isn't taught at all, or from a standpoint of fear and here's how you need to act urgently. But, we're not like necessarily giving out the scientific information and educating children and how they can really make positive change and positive impacts like as quickly and as just impactfully as possible. So, yeah, I think I was really grateful to have that in middle school, but I definitely didn't begin learning about solutions until high school and beginning to connect with peers about it.
I just wanted to say, Giselle, you all both, just from beginning talking, you all have like a really great adept understanding of this issue. And, Giselle, you coming from a place of like, coming from your place of like understanding that there has to be a systemic solution. You mentioning that, it has to come from the policy level. That's something that I definitely agree with you on. And Madigan, you mentioning BP perked my ears up. I'm excited to get into that later on. And yeah, it just from this first question, it really sounds like you all got a really great concept about like the problem and like what you all do, or like, and what steps need to be taken. And I'm gonna move a little bit away from the questions to kind of ask you all your thoughts of like, do you all think a lot of young people in this country or in the world are understand the issue the way that you both do?
I mean, definitely not. Something that we work on a lot with the organization that we represent, Schools for Climate Action, is looking at climate education, specifically in the United States, but I mean, it really applies everywhere in the world, and how the next generations are being taught about this crisis and what they can do. And every single conclusion that we come to is just that it's not enough. And even if children are being educated about it, I mean, it's terrifying. We can't expect a lot of these, little kids to look at an issue that, they're being told could kill them when they grow up, and expect them to feel empowered. I think there are a lot of flaws in how it's taught, and a lot of flaws in the fact that it's not taught in most places. So I think there's definitely a lot of positive change that could be made there, especially in empowering children to make change that feels good to them, and taking off the responsibility that unfortunately has been placed on us and the generation to come of it's our responsibility to change things in our lives and have to sacrifice so much for this issue. When in reality, it's kind of a miscommunication, because there is systemic change that can be made without us having to make, personal sacrifices and without us having to feel guilt.
And you mentioned Schools for Climate Action, and I want to know if you all want to take a time to explain what Schools for Climate Action is and how you all got involved.
Yeah, so we are a student and teacher volunteer run organization.
Grassroots and nonpartisan.
Yeah, grassroots and nonpartisan, and we basically help. We have their students from other districts around the country reach out for help in wanting to pass climate-related resolutions either in their district, at their school, and we help them work through those. And
so yeah, our main source of communication with our organization is school boards. We work with parent boards, student boards, etc. And we also work with individual students around the country who want to learn more about climate change. We're starting to get some chapters around the country, but right now it's mostly local. And one of our main things is calling on Congress to declare climate change a generational justice issue, which is not something that we've been seeing like quite as much. I think it's a pretty new concept to declare it a justice issue, but I think that's one of the things we really want to talk about and make known, is that it is not just that it's been laid on us and our generation and students right now. And so I think that's one of the things we really try to bring to Congress's attention.
You all have such a great way of explaining this, and I feel like I'm talking to like policy experts right now, and it's so cool to emphasize that you all are both high school students, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I just wanted to ask if you all wanted to explain more about what a generational justice issue means and what you all hope that declaration could mean.
Talk about that? Go for it. Okay. So specifically what we work on in our organization is we've been mentioning a lot about climate education and how we feel there are a lot of systemic flaws with that, specifically in the United States. And one of the things we really try to empower students to do is to be able to acknowledge that it isn't fair that this issue has been placed on us. And I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to get Congress to acknowledge as well, because it isn't our fault. You know, we weren't alive when this was an urgent issue, and now it's far past that. So just kind of getting Congress to acknowledge that this shouldn't be on us, essentially. And by generational justice, we're kind of acknowledging that the just thing to do would be to make some systemic change pretty quickly, so that it isn't our responsibility and our generation's responsibility. So that's kind of what we're discussing there.
Do you think that generational justice is something that's talked a lot about in climate spaces, or do you think it needs to be talked about more?
I think it needs to be talked about more. I mean, we are learning just within working in our organization that it's a concept that isn't widely talked about whatsoever. And I think it's one of the things that makes our organization stand out a little bit. Schools for Climate Action actually just recently won the American Climate Leadership Awards for 2022. So I think that's one of the things that makes our organization stand out, is it is kind of more groundbreaking information to look at it from that perspective. I don't know if you have more to say about that.
I think you covered it perfectly.
Yeah, it sounds, I really hope that messaging is something that resonates with a lot of young people, because that's something that definitely can inspire change. But moving on to talking about like your work in Congress, you mentioned that a lot of your work is school boards and local level. So how did that get you all both the opportunity to write a resolution and get it introduced in Congress? Like, can you all tell me the story of how that kind of went from how it started and then where it all led up to be?
Yeah, so we started researching in the fall of 2021, I believe. 2020, yes. Fall of 2020. I'm getting my years mixed up. We started researching in the fall of 2020. And from there into 2021, we really just honed in on research. The reason we decided on the topic of writing a resolution about the mental health effects of climate change on youth was just because it's something so prevalent in our lives and that we see on a day-to-day basis between our friends and our peers and our families. And it's just something that affects us and our community so much.
I'll let you continue,
Yes.
But I do want to just add that we were originally, I think up until around fall of 2021, we were collaborating with a neighboring school that actually burned down in 2017 during the same fire, the Tubbs fire that I lost my house in. So a lot of the students there that we were working with were students who had experienced, like the walls of their education burning down, which was, I think, such a reality check, especially regarding this resolution specifically. So that was one of the things that was really inspiring us to get started.
Yeah, so that's kind of what inspired our resolution. And then through I guess the first 5-6 months of 2021, we just did research and wrote drafts of our resolution. And through the summer and into fall, we finalized our resolution and brought it to Representative Thompson, who is the representative of our district here in Sonoma County. And his staffers really just helped us hone in on the wording and getting all of the correct writing and having it flow well.
Yeah, it was definitely a pretty lengthy process.
Yes.
I think one of the things that is probably less talked about in terms of passing legislation is just the difficulty communicating, especially as youth. It's definitely, there are some barriers in being able to just advocate for ourselves. We definitely had some hurdles that we had to get over in terms of communicating with staffers, with people just working in congressional offices. I think we definitely have to fight pretty hard to make our voices heard. So it did take a significant amount of time to get some real ears on this issue. And Representative Mike Thompson was on board from day one when we introduced it to him in September. And then it was a slow going process for sure until around February or March.
Early February is when it really picked up, and
2022, which is, I'll continue this story.
But basically from there, it really picked up, as Madigan said, in the beginning of February 2022, and we were able to they were able to actually introduce it like about a month later on March 9th of 2022. And we basically just did a bunch of endorsement emailing and just to get support for this resolution and just kind of show how important of an issue it is.
Yeah, along the way we had Mike Thompson's office releasing some press releases, which was really exciting. Because those are very public, and I think those are one of the ways that we got the most attention for this. We also got the opportunity to speak at a town hall the day after the introduction of our resolution, which is officially called H.Res 975. And at the town hall, it was co-hosted by Representative Kathy Castor. She is a Florida representative. And so her and Representative Thompson led this town hall where they talked about some climate issues, and they let us speak for a couple of minutes about our experience with the resolution and just why we wanted to introduce it, why we felt it was important, which was really exciting. And along the way, one thing we forgot to mention is it did go through the Legislative Council and everything, just through getting introduced so we could make the language sound really concise, really accurate. And we're so grateful for the final product, because I think more than anything, something that doesn't always happen in Congress, but happened for us, is the staff we were working with they really just kept the integrity of our resolution. They stayed true to our words, our research. They asked us for every change they made. So we're so excited about the final product, and we feel like it really is our work.
Yeah, how did you all feel throughout the whole process? Like, was it exciting? Was there any frustrations?
There was some definitely highs and lows. We worked with the multiple staffers throughout the process, and we definitely had some more difficulties with different people that we worked with. And it was just like a lot of following up and asking, oh, can we do this now? How can we further this along? Can we set up a meeting? And then once we kind of followed up enough, set up enough meetings, did enough work of just answering our email, creating the changes that were necessary, we were just really thankful that they were able to finally just keep it as what we wanted it to be. They were really great about just making sure it was what we wanted it to say. It wasn't, they didn't change any of the actual meaning behind the statements that we had. They just changed the wording, which we really appreciated.
And another thing we were really enthusiastic about in the end is actually some of the changes that they made were adding things to the requests in our resolution that actually we didn't know would have been possible. So they weren't things we wrote into the original resolution. We were, I think, toying with the ideas, but weren't sure what would be too much to ask for just one piece of legislation. So we were really excited that in the end, they ended up adding some other things that are super positive changes, especially regarding mental health. And funding going towards mental health that we hadn't worked in at the beginning, but they wanted to include in this.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things that I noticed about the resolution, was that it's substantive in the sense that it provides appropriations, and that's super cool, because not only do you have not only would you have Congress recognizing that it's something to take a look at, but you actually have meaningful policy action. So kudos to you all for working on that.
I think just expanding a little bit on the downsides as well. I'm sure this won't come as a surprise whatsoever, but youth activists are often taken advantage of in terms of just, I think one of our struggles here was really making it known to a lot of the people that we were working with that our work was credible and reliable, that we had worked really hard and our research was accurate, and we were representing an organization that was real, it was doing good work. And I don't think we should have had to prove ourselves in that way. I think we've reached a point in this crisis where anyone who wants to help should have the ability to help and the support of adults, especially, to help, whether or not it's your first bill you've ever written like us, or whether it's something you do with your entire life. I think that should have gotten more support just because of how urgent this issue is. And I definitely wish that had been acknowledged more, because it was a slow process to get ourselves to a point where we could say, yeah, we have the authority to introduce this resolution. We know what we're talking about. We're passionate about this issue. And just kind of like proving our like validity, if that makes sense. So that was definitely, I mean, I hope that going forward, that's something that continues to change, because I don't think any youth should have to like prove themselves for wanting to fight for positive change. I think that's definitely something that we'd like to see
and
different.
I know like we went through like all these struggles with everything just Madigan just said, and I know other people who have done other resolutions that have had it much worse than that. We went through a lot, but I know other students who have created resolutions and written them that have gone through like even more hardships with trying to just be recognized for their work and having it stay true to what they want it to be.
And we see the comparison, especially in the end. By the last several months of working on our resolution, we got nothing but like endless support from Representative Thompson's office. So we see the contrast there. You know, we see the like questioning whether we are able to really pass this, and then we see the just like unconditional support and the way that like in a matter of weeks that got our resolution introduced. So we definitely see that, and we see that that empowered us. We did something that we're really proud of because of that adult support. And I think that's something, I think that's something we could see a lot more of, because we can speak firsthand from what a positive experience that was to have the support of Congress members and their staffers on this resolution specifically.
So what do you all think changed between like, or do you think there was a change where you all were working on this since 2020, so that's like more than a year, and then all of a sudden recently you're saying in February you got a lot of support. So what do you think changed?
It was definitely just changes in staff. I think sometimes you land people who maybe are the issues more personal to them, and I think that maybe ended up being what happened in the end is the staffer that ended up helping us
this year,
this year.
Yeah, when we came back from break in January, we had like just this person who stepped into a new role
that was the legislative fellow in Thompson's office,
and he was like, this is one of the most pressing issues on my plate that I want to support you guys, and I want to get this through. So as from like day one of talking with him, he was in such support of what we were doing and was so helpful in just getting the process moving again.
Yeah, I think the final push was just working with somebody who had the same passion that we did. And I mean, we have absolutely nothing negative to say in terms of the other staff that we worked with. I think they're all incredible and doing really, really good work. It just so happened that with the issue that we were trying to press, that wasn't at the top of their priority list, and it just worked out that way. So we both feel very, very grateful to have ended up with somebody in the end who cared about this issue as much as we did, who studied it through college, who worked in this field before entering politics. So yeah, it worked out very, very well for us.
And it sounds like you all learned so much about like the institutional and systemic issues, stuff like the way that staff change can affect the way that policies are pushed is something systemic that needs to be addressed more. But was there anything else that you all learned throughout the process of going from drafting to introduction that you all would want to share with other youth?
I can riff a little bit unless you have something to say.
I would say just citing sources, I think, was one of the biggest things.
Oh, yes.
Just always making sure you're marking, like wherever you get a statistic from, write it down, because we definitely had to go backwards hunting into a bunch of documents and refinding the statistics, just because we hadn't necessarily recorded them at the beginning of our project, just because we didn't know at that time. So definitely write down your sources.
I'll say also, for me personally, I never really pictured myself being somebody who could comfortably speak to a Congress member, just one-on-one. That's definitely not somewhere that I saw myself. And I personally love public speaking. Like, I'm a complete theater kid. That's been so much of my personality, but I think it takes a lot of work, a lot of just like attempts and fails to be able to have conversations with people who hold so much political power over you, and to be able to make your voice heard. And that's definitely something that we learned a lot. We both feel comfortable talking to, people with so much authority now. And I think that's really important, especially because we want to empower youth to speak up for what we're asking in this crisis and for any other issues that youth might be passionate about. So I think that's a very important skill that we learned, was just being able to feel comfortable within our voices and perspectives when having conversations with adults.
Yeah, it definitely gave me so much confidence just through this experience, like through the experience of writing this resolution, because I definitely came into this not knowing as much as I do now, not having experienced as much as I do now. So writing this resolution just showed me so much more and gave me the confidence to be able to say I can speak on an issue that's important, imperative in my life, and that I do have the authority to say this, like to talk about this stuff, because my perspective is just as valid as someone else's.
Yeah. And I'll say that I'm glad that you all walked away with this with a lots of confidence, because you all have done something that not many people in this country can say that they have. You all have written a resolution. You all have advised a congressman. It's really, really cool work. And I'm hoping that confidence can be forwarded and like moved to making even more positive change in the world, which leads to my next question of what do you both think is the highest priority? What do you all think is the highest priority climate policy, in your opinion, that needs to get passed? And maybe kind of building into that, do you all have any plans for other resolutions or other policies now that this one is already introduced?
Do you want to talk about H.Res?
Sure. Yes, we'll do. Okay. Yeah, so while our organization is working on our resolution, H.Res 975, we are simultaneously working on another resolution called H.Res 29, which is about climate education. And
Representative Barbara Lee.
Sorry, no, you're good. Introduced by Representative Barbara Lee, and that we've been simultaneously pushing for both of these resolutions recently and just trying to get more co-sponsors for both of them. And we really just think that the most important issue is to address with climate change is just the education part, because we cannot have informed politicians in the future about climate change if they don't ever learn it or ever taught about climate change. So just starting to implement more climate education into our current schools just will help the future become more knowledgeable on this issue and just create more generations of people who have a better understanding of this systemic issue.
Yeah, I want to also talk about, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to expand a little bit on British Petroleum, BP, and the narrative that they coined. I think the end of the 1990s.
I believe it was the 90s into the early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been about 25 years. It's been something that we haven't really been able to escape, and it's really problematic. And it ties back to climate education, which is that the way that climate education is taught, especially in the US, is through the lens of the carbon footprint, which I'm sure everyone has heard. That's a part of everyone's lifestyles, is reduce your carbon footprint, use less plastic, turn off the lights, drive electric cars, recycle, take shorter showers, like the things that you can do. And unfortunately, something that comes along with that is the guilt and fear that I was mentioning earlier, because when you place so much personal responsibility upon, especially youth, who now feel like they have to take this on, they have to give up parts of their childhood that they should not have to sacrifice. That's really terrifying, to have to feel like, oh, taking a longer shower means climate change is my fault. And so I think a lot of climate leaders have began to identify how problematic this is. And like I mentioned earlier, this whole carbon footprint narrative was coined by British Petroleum, and it was honestly just like a marketing tool. It was a way for them to take the public eye off of how much carbon they were contributing and how many greenhouse gases. And we look at gas companies, we look at oil companies, all of these things that cannot be faced unless systemically. And that's where the real issue is. And any statistic will tell you that. But I think they were really able to distract the public by saying, no, here's what you can do. We stand for climate, even though they don't. They're huge contributors. And so I think it's false the way that it's taught to youth. I think raising youth with guilt and telling them what they can do that isn't really going to make an impact. You know, you're not lying to them. It's great to practice sustainable habits, and like any climate activist will tell you that, but it's not the answer to the problem. So I think something that we addressed in HR 29 and something that we continue to talk about as we represent Schools for Climate Action is that we need to empower youth to work with the adults in power, because that's where the most change is going to be made. It can't be through continuing to teach the carbon footprint and a little mini lesson on how you can make your lifestyle, you know, carbon neutral. It's just, that's not sustainable. It's not going to fix the issue. So we talk about that in our climate education resolution, and we talk about it a lot when representing our organization.
Yeah, and I think with the guilt, just for me to kind of like expand on that with the guilt, not only is there a guilt, but when it comes to taking personal responsibility for carbon and for climate change, there's also a cost. You know, people transitioning to more sustainable habits that are still being sold in our economy as a premium, like electric cars being charged more than or being more expensive than regular cars, stuff like that.
And I mean, we talked about this with Representative Barbara Lee. Actually, Giselle and I were not any of the people who got to meet with her personally. We are working on outreach for the resolution now, but it does belong to some students who graduated a few years ago. But something that I think was spoken about with Barbara Lee that helped she's so enthusiastic to represent us on this, and just something we talk about a lot in climate education is how unequitable the, you know, carbon footprint narrative is, because you know, not everyone has the same resources. There are plenty of people who want to feel empowered to fight for climate and who honestly are facing the results of the climate crisis more in an unfair way because of their location, because of poverty, etc. And so I think that's also a really just unhelpful way to approach it, because, you know, not everyone can afford an electric car. They cost so much more. Not everyone has the resources to eat a plant-based diet. It's not how it works, you know, all over the country, all over the world. And we definitely do not want advocacy, especially on climate, to become something that only people with privilege can do. It should be equitable. It should be something that anyone who feels passionate about can act on.
Yeah, and definitely to all underserved groups and youth should definitely get that equitable access as well. So yeah, those sound like really cool initiatives, both of them. I'm wondering, for you all, your thoughts on the political landscape now and the political landscape possibly after the 2022 election, and how that could affect your hopes for these resolutions, or like how that could affect what you're going to be doing next.
Up to you.
You can.
Okay. So something that we learn about a lot, especially because our teacher and our organization leader, Nancy Metzger-Carter, she tries to be honest with us as best she can about what's going on, especially in our current political environment. And one of the things that was really pretty devastating to all of us as climate activists is to see everything that our current administration promised when entering office and the ways that kind of fell through. And
are there any examples that you don't want to mention?
Nancy was just talking about this to us. I think we learn a little bit less about the specific, there are things addressing like oil reduction, like et cetera, less funding going towards oil companies, mining, et cetera. Those were all things that we were promised, you know, at the beginning of this like current administration, and they're things that have dropped on the priority list. And I think it's easy to promise a lot and deliver less. And we understand that. We understand that as, you know, people who work in this field, that it's not always possible to deliver everything that you promise. But I think it's disappointing to us to see that we were really feeling confident being in the hands of someone who seemed to care about it as much as we did. And I think it's just, there are clearly a lot of issues going on globally that we understand why they're taking priority. And, we're not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think we definitely hope to see in future administrations maybe following through on promises, especially about an issue that's just undeniably urgent. It's not something that can just be pushed aside.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight to you all, if you feel like these issues and like some issues are taking priority over, let's say, climate issues and climate advocacy, I just want to encourage you both to kind of think about how probably all these issues that are being talked about in the global stage right now are connected to climate.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there are ways you can connect like the conflicts in Ukraine and Russia to climate.
Yeah.
And there are ways that you can connect inflation and other issues that are being talked about to climate. So, yeah.
I think it just continues to prove itself to be an issue that's not going to be easy to face. And I understand why people in power feel the need to back away from that, because it's intimidating, but it's also not something that can be done without their help. So we hope to see more change in that area as soon as possible, because it's really approaching fast.
Yeah. So what are you all, what's in store next for you all in trying to get these two resolutions passed?
Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So, I can speak more for our resolution.
Yeah, that's
our focus is really in the House currently, and just getting as many co-sponsors as we can to show support for this resolution,
as well as organizational endorsements.
Yeah. And from there, we really hope to get it passed through the House. And
how do you all do that? How do you all get co-sponsors?
Emailing.
It's spam
emailing.
We do a lot of emailing. I say, honestly, the most important lesson I've learned here is following up. I've followed up. I have like emails in my sent drafts that no one's responded to, and I continually every week I will respond to them saying like, hey, look at this, and it's just like asking for them to take a look at our resolution and see and bring it to their like legislative council or bring it up to their representative. And it really is, we just do it through that, and we asked if they would like to meet with us to talk about it, and we've conducted a bunch of meetings. I've attended and led a bunch of meetings advocating for co-sponsors for both H.Res 975 and H.Res 29.
And it just, honestly, we just spam them, and I think
lots of spreadsheets.
So honestly, it's all just like tracking down more contacts for more staffers. We just like bombard their email. When they don't respond within 5 days, or send more. And like just talking specifically about like Earth Day, for example, which is coming up. A lot of people are attending climate strikes. We are going to be on our computers sending out follow-ups all day long, as representatives and just people in policy are often looking for ways to stand for climate, especially on Earth Day, and whether that be just something they want to show to the general public, even if it's not something they're passionate about, it is a good opportunity for us to really just hand them something and say, here, look, co-sponsor our climate resolution. So yeah, really just reaching out as much as we can. Like, we've really learned that we can't be shy about nagging them, even though it feels to us sometimes like, oh, this is annoying, we shouldn't pressure them, but it really, really works.
Yeah, like just the other day, I'd already emailed this person 4 times. I emailed her a 5th time, and she said, hey, Giselle, we actually have this in our legislative council now. Thanks for checking in. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. They're actually looking at it. That's so awesome.
After like the 4th reply?
Like, it was like the 4th one. I like sent it so many times. I was like, hi.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it sounds like, hopefully, it sounds like a lot of work, honestly. But hopefully everything goes well and everything is going to pass. Before we like pivot away from talking about the work, you all talked about like how it shouldn't be you all's responsibility. You all talked about how it's frustrating that the issue is being put on you all, So how do you all balance, like acknowledging that the responsibility shouldn't be on you while also simultaneously taking on this amount of work? Because I will be honest to you both, the amount of work that you're doing, people are out there getting paid a lot of money to do those things.
Yes, we only volunteer. I don't think I've gotten paid for any.
Yeah, I think one of the most shocking things to people when we talk to them is that one, we as students are running this organization, and two, we are doing it with no money. Like this is all, we are just doing it with our time. And I think how we kind of navigate that guilt versus and responsibility is the fact that like it definitely helps me feel good about like, gives me hope for the future when I do activism, even though at the same time I'm just reading these studies that show very depressing statistics for my future. It gives, the fact that I can do something gives me hope for change. And it also, actually just lost my train of thought.
I can pick this up a little bit, but just, I mean, my perspective on it, I think I balance a lot of passions simultaneously. And I know that's not true for everybody, but I mean, at least for me, I already mentioned I'm a theater kid at heart. 80% of my life is music, acting, dance. That's what I love. And I don't plan on ever giving that up because I do believe very strongly in following also what brings you joy. And a lot of times the climate crisis does not bring me joy. It makes me stressed. I don't want to have to necessarily do this work. And like, yes, there are great things. It's empowering to make change, but it's hard. It causes a lot of grief. It brings up a lot of trauma specifically for me. And like a lot of the way I kind of balance that is, this is a very, very personal experience to me because my experience is unique, but I've had to set aside a lot of time to just like process the amount that I lost and how that wasn't fair. I was 12 years old. I watched everything I owned go up in flames, and it's indescribable how much grief comes with the amount that I lost. And so I think giving myself time to grieve that as well. And for people who didn't firsthand experience necessarily like something that extreme, just, grieving the parts of our county that have been damaged and the fact that we've missed out on school dances and weeks of school because our county's filled with smoke. I think it's also fair to take time for our mental health. And I mean, that's what our resolution's about, is acknowledging the mental health effects of this, but just being able to balance like what we need to also just feel good as people, because it's undeniably such a heavy issue. Like it is not all good to be working on it. And it does bring us hope, but it also brings us a lot of sadness and a lot of fear. And so I think just balancing, finding ways to process and be emotionally honest with yourself and find things that also bring you just authentic joy away from all of the stress of this.
Our organization, within our organization, we've really focused on if you're experiencing like climate burnout, just like it's becoming too much for you, just take a step back. Like there are other students and other people here who are spending their time who are not as burnt out in the moment. So we definitely like prioritize, and it's been our organization, if you need just to take a step back, take that step back, because at the end of the day, this shouldn't be your responsibility. You shouldn't have to be dedicating so much of your time and life and unhappiness to this subject, because it shouldn't be our future. And unfortunately it is. So like the reason I do it is because I don't always see a bunch of other adults doing stuff. So it gives me a little bit of hope that I can do something as a child, as like a youth person in this world, and that hopefully it'll take me into my adult life to continue doing this activism. But it's just hard because at the end of the day, we shouldn't be having to have to do this.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you all have created a great space for you all to continue doing this work, but also balancing your mental health. I'm glad that you all have that, and I hope that you all remember to take care of yourselves and practice self-care when you need to. And I think those skills and those coping mechanisms will help you as you move on into the future. And I think both of you have bright futures ahead, and I'm really excited to see what you all do, which leads to my next question of what are you all's plans after you graduate high school?
I can go first. So I have always been really interested in STEM. Like growing up, math was my life. I love science. So then I came into high school and kind of just like, I was like, where do I want to concentrate all of my STEM love? And I kind of just found engineering, and it just is such a fun field. Like I've taken some classes in it, and it's just really interesting to me. And with my climate advocacy, it's really honed me in on wanting to do like environmental engineering, or just like engineering within a sustainable and like sustainable concentration and just environmental work within it, just because I feel that's a place where I can combine my love of science and as well as me wanting to help my world.
And then for me, I feel torn between a couple of things. I'm still definitely figuring it out. I feel very drawn towards social policy and kind of looking at all of this from a social justice standpoint. As much as I also do love STEM and specifically science, I think I'd like to look at it from a kind of like humanities, social science perspective. But at the same time, I'm also creative at heart. And I think something that I would just like to say is that like another thing that we really promote in our organization is like, no matter what your interest is, and it doesn't have to be outreach or public speaking or writing a resolution, you can be an artist who wants to make, combine activism and art. And so I think, and like really truly hope that this advocacy stays a part of my life forever, but I think it very well could be something that I find a way to bring a voice to through being in the arts in some way, and just finding ways to bring it into every field because it doesn't need to be exclusive.
Yeah, you can be involved in climate in any field and any interest. There's always connections between everything, I feel, so you can always make that connection. So whatever you're interested in, it doesn't mean you don't have to want to do something for climate as well.
Yeah, and definitely I just wanted to hear what you all's thoughts are now, and definitely no pressure to make any decisions now. You're both young, and if those things change, that's fine. But it's really cool to hear that, both of you, even though, this is a large part of your lives, you all are still hoping to pursue maybe some things that aren't exactly directly related to the advocacy, because I think that's what you both deserve. Young people deserve to not have this take over their entire lives. And yeah, I wish you all the best of luck in your future pursuits. Yeah. And just a little bit about me. I've made policy and like policy writing a part of like my life. Like I went from writing a resolution in high school, like you, at my local level back in Guam, though, so definitely not on the same level. But yeah, I've gone from writing bills in high school to working in the state legislature in Guam, interning in Congress, and now doing what I do now, which is trying to make policy work as accessible to youth as possible. And so I was wondering, from your perspectives, do you think there's a lot of students that are interested in policy making?
I would say no.
I think just a lot of kids don't realize it's something they could do. I definitely never thought I'd ever be writing a resolution. I never thought I'd be meeting with representatives. So to be able to do this, it's honestly surreal even now.
Yeah.
Like it was like halfway through the process, I was like, wait, we're doing this at the federal level? I asked Matt, I'm like, wait, is this on the federal level? And she's like, yeah, so what do you think we were working towards? I'm like, I don't know. It's just like, it's definitely like really crazy, because it feels like you're always told like, oh, you can do that when you're an adult. You'll have power to do that when you're older. And it's like, no, I have the power to do it now.
And I mean, like, yeah, we can talk about like the systemic issues in education and, working towards empowering students to work on that level. But I mean, even in any field, climate aside, I think it's not something that any student imagines themselves like being able to do, to just like work directly with Congress. Like, we are very, very privileged to be given the resources that we are, and we acknowledge that very clearly. I think we're very lucky to have such adult support
and good climate, like amazing climate education.
Our list of contacts, just like the way that we've been taught to be able to speak on this level. I know that not every I'll correct that, almost no schools anywhere have those kind of resources. So we're so grateful for that. And we acknowledge that we absolutely cannot just be here and say like, here, write a resolution, we're throwing this at you, because it's difficult. It requires a lot of resources, a lot of support. And as much as like it would be ideal to work towards everyone being able to do that, we also know that it's not something that everyone is able to do right now. We'd like it to be. But it's also just not something, like you don't grow up really thinking like, oh, in 5 years when I'm still an actual child, I'll be able to work with the government. It's just, it's shocking, and it does feel surreal. It's very, very
I feel
exciting.
like people just are like, government's so far away from people, I can feel like. So the fact that we're connecting with government at such a young age is just like, as I said, surreal. It's weird idea to process, just because you're always told like, oh, these really like amazing people, like we have amazing politicians and such that are doing these things, are like, they're at the top of their career, like they are doing policy and all that, and we are just kids here in their district. But it's really inspiring to be lucky enough to realize that they're not so far away, that we can go talk to them, that they will go support us, and that we can be involved in the government in this way by writing this resolution.
Yeah, it's really cool. Did you want to give, so you mentioned that your organization is like student-led, volunteer, but you all mentioned some of the adults that have helped you through the process. Did you all want to give a shout out or thanks to any of them?
Huge, massive shout out to Nancy Metzger Carter. She's our teacher here. She runs Schools for Climate Action. She thinks from the perspective of, as a teacher and as a parent, I'm a mandated reporter. And when I see my students suffering, which they're suffering from the stress under the climate crisis, they're suffering from personally experiencing climate disasters, they're suffering from wildfires, they're suffering from floods. I am mandated to speak up and make change. And that's her perspective. We're so grateful for her feeling such a need to support us, and we're so grateful for her support and guidance. I don't know where neither of us
know. I could never have done this without Nancy. She has provided, just as Madigan said, so much support, and she's always believed in us. There's never been a moment where she's like, I think an adult should do this. She's always like, you guys should go speak. Like, youth voices should be heard. And she's just so supportive in that way. And it's really amazing to just be surrounded by that support as a youth activist.
She's also making some groundbreaking just education discoveries in terms of how to tie climate education into other subjects. One of her more important classes that she teaches here is called Civic Engagement, which works in plenty of climate work. And I think it's one of what we consider our climate classes here at our school. But it's not necessarily a climate class. It's just how to get involved on a political level that anyone can participate in. And she's really working with other students and teachers across the country to work that into their curriculum.
Super cool. So do you all have any thoughts that you would say to young people who are interested in doing what you all did, but find it intimidating? Because you all talked about it being intimidating at the beginning.
It most definitely is. I mean, one place they can start is they don't have to start going for the federal level. They can start in their school, in their area. I mean, they can even reach out to Schools for Climate Action. We have a lot of toolkits and resources that we'd love to share with other involved and interested youth.
Yeah, I mean, our organization has lots of resources in terms of way to contact, ways to get involved that aren't necessarily such large commitments, because we know we dedicate such a large percentage of our time to this, and it doesn't have to be that for everyone. But yeah, definitely, I'd say, as cliche as it sounds, just perseverance, because we've learned so many lessons in that throughout this process. Patience, things happen when you're fighting for change. Positive change happens, and it takes a really long time, and it's frustrating, and it's hard to just keep fighting to make your voice heard when that should, we shouldn't be faced with these issues. As we've been talking about, it should be it should be a way that we're supported by the generations above us, but it's not. So just keep working and you will definitely be heard. Just like taking those steps. Anyone really can do what we did. I think it just took a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of dedication, but anyone who feels passionate about it can definitely do that.
Cool. Well, it sounds like, one way for people who are intimidated would be to get involved with you guys, and that would be super cool. And yeah, I think you all provide a lot of hope to a lot of people who might not think that they can do this, or might just feel like hopeless in the current situation. So we're wrapping up the interview today, and to stay on a hopeful level, I wanted to ask you both, what gives you hope for our climate future?
I mean, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but being able to do this work just gives me a little bit of hope that I've seen people in the government now who are in support of us. It's been really inspiring to be able to talk with staffers and representatives who are like, your issue is so important. Yes, like we would love to to support you in this. So that's definitely been inspiring and hopeful for me.
I also talked about this a little bit earlier, but just seeing the way that climate advocacy can extend through all fields and all passions. It doesn't need to be exclusive to the type of work that we did, or to anything that you see really like widely advertised. But I think it gives me hope to see that people who are interested in graphic design, huge part of this movement, someone who's interested in being an author, you're seeing all these great climate books coming out, even like children's books that are really inspiring. And, you're seeing actors in Hollywood begin to make it a part of their, just like something that they stand for, that they are advocates and they give money that they make to organizations. Like we see support in all fields, and that gives me a lot of hope, because I think this movement can expand to everyone, even if you're not doing one specific type of work, and that's the way that we are going to make the most effective change.
Yeah, well, thank you both for talking with me today. It's been really great to get to know you all better, and I think a lot of people will hopefully listen to your stories, get involved, reach out to the both of you to find out ways to get involved as well. And yeah, I'm hoping that people will be inspired by you sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate getting to talk
It's been
to you.
wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for inviting us here, and we hope our story can help other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's any last word that you all wanted to say, feel free now.
I feel like we covered everything.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, all right. Well,
We
it's
will
been a pleasure.
say our
Mhm.
website, Schools for Climate Action. We have lots of resources, lots of toolkits, like Giselle mentioned. We also have links to view our resolutions directly, and lots of resources in how to communicate with your representatives to help promote our resolutions or to help create your own.
Yeah, that's a great resource. We'll be sure to share out their website. Feel free to send it to me in like a follow-up email, and I'll feel free to share it out with our networks.
Awesome.
And yeah, it sounds like you all have a lot of good resources there. And yeah, thanks so much for talking to me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you
You
so
as
much.
well.